Alright, chat. The ultimate 9/11 conspiracy theory. I don't have any opinions, any views on 9/11. You know what I'm saying? I'm not gonna say anything, not gonna speak on anything, okay? Just reacting to this chat for entertainment purposes only.
Level 1, the official narrative.
Alright, bet. Lock in, chat. Lock in.
We of course have to start this video with the official narrative, starting at the top of our iceberg. It goes like this. At 9:30 p.m. on September 11th, 2001, George Tenet, director of the CIA, informed President George W. Bush and other senior officials that Osama bin Laden and his terrorist group Al-Qaeda were responsible for that morning's terrorist attacks on the United States. Within 2 weeks of this assertion, evidence left behind by the 19 hijackers linked them irrefutably to the attacks, and investigators had identified accomplices in several cities who had helped plan and execute the atrocities. Initially, bin Laden denied any responsibility. However, on the day of the attacks,
Of course.
national security agencies intercepted communications that pointed to him and Al-Qaeda as solely responsible for the attacks, and other suspects were soon ruled out. It wasn't until 2004 that Osama bin Laden claimed full responsibility for the attacks, in a video sent to news outlet Al Jazeera. The US government has always maintained that all the evidence indicates that bin Laden and his multinational group were responsible, and despite admitting to failings in intelligence that allowed the terrorists to carry out the coordinated attacks, this has remained the official narrative.
Damn.
Let's move a little further down the iceberg with level 2, which is that the official narrative was correct, but that the government, CIA and FBI worked together to cover some things up. Some accept that bin Laden was responsible, but the incompetence of the FBI and the CIA allowed Al-Qaeda operatives to infiltrate the US, despite some of them being on watch lists and the government receiving many warnings. Many believe the full truth about the mistakes and opportunities lost to stop the terrorists has been covered up, and that despite warnings, the Bush administration did not take the imminent threat of an attack seriously enough. So what warnings did they have exactly? Well, it's been reported that the US received upwards of 30 warnings in the lead up to 9/11, and as early as December 1998, the CIA reported to then President Bill Clinton that Al-Qaeda were preparing to attack the US, potentially using commercial aircraft as weapons. In January 2000, the CIA reportedly had 2 of the 9/11 hijackers, Nawaf al-Hazmi and Khalid al-Mihdhar, under surveillance after they had entered the United States. However, due to a communication breakdown within the agency and a lack of trust with other intelligence agencies, they did not share this information with the FBI until 2 weeks before the attacks.
Oh my gosh.
In April 2000, Ahmad Shah Massoud gave a speech to the European Parliament in Brussels. During the speech, Massoud said that his intelligence agents had acquired limited knowledge of an imminent terrorist attack on US soil. These warnings went unheeded, and Massoud was assassinated by Al-Qaeda 2 days before the 9/11 attacks. On July 10, 2001, J. Kofor Black, the CIA's counter-terrorism chief, and CIA Director George Tenet met with Condoleezza Rice, the National Security Advisor. They informed her about communication intercepts and other top-secret intelligence, indicating that it was increasingly likely that Al-Qaeda would soon attack the United States. However, for unknown reasons, Rice appeared unconcerned about the warning. Similarly, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld was also unconvinced and suggested that it was a deception intended to gauge the US response. The same day this information was revealed, FBI Special Agent Kenneth Williams sent a letter to FBI headquarters demanding further investigation into men suspected of being connected to Al-Qaeda, attending flight schools in Arizona. This document is known as the Phoenix Memo. On August 6, 2001, the President's daily briefing warned that bin Laden was planning to exploit his operatives' access to the US to mount a terrorist strike. Information from the FBI revealed suspicious activity that was consistent with preparations for hijackings or other types of attack. On August 23, 2001, just under 2 months before the attack, the CIA were given a list of 19 men who were known to be living in the United States that were suspected of planning a terrorist attack. 4 of those were eventual hijackers: Mohammed Atta, Marwan al-Sheikhi, Khalid al-Mihdhar, and Nawaf al-Hazmi. The other names are unknown, but it is theorized that they could have been the other men who participated in the attacks. But it's strange that authorities didn't increase security measures at weak points, like government buildings and public transportation, so you can see why conspiracy theorists believe there may have been a cover-up.
Yo, that's wild, bro. They had them under surveillance for years, bro. And they literally told the White House, and like nothing happened, bro. They didn't increase the
Level
security
3.
or anything, bro.
9/11 was a complete inside job orchestrated by the US government in order for them to invade Afghanistan and Iraq. Prior to 9/11, the price of oil had been steadily declining due to increased production capacity and new finds. An attack on America that blamed Muslim terrorists would be the perfect way to have an immediate and long-term effect on oil prices and support military action against the Middle East. This conspiracy links up to the view that the buildings of the World Trade Center were destroyed by controlled demolition or other means that we will explore later in the video.
Bro, what?
Level 4. Missing black boxes.
What?
All of the planes involved in the 9/11 attacks carried 2 black boxes each, which recorded flight data and cockpit conversations. However, the official report stated that none of the 4 black boxes from the 2 planes that hit the Twin Towers were found in the debris. Yet Michael Bellone and Nicholas Damasi, who worked extensively in the wreckage of the World Trade Center, wrote a book titled Behind the Scenes, Ground Zero. In it, they claimed that using expensive high-tech equipment, they helped federal agents find 3 of the 4 black boxes from the jetliners. As for the Pentagon black boxes, allegedly, they were too severely damaged to retrieve any information from them. The only black boxes recovered were from United 93, the plane which passengers and crew fought back and forced to crash in a rural Pennsylvania cornfield. However, the families of the victims had to wait for 7 months before they could listen to the tapes, and it took 5.5 years before they were produced at the trial of the so-called 20th hijacker, Zachary Moussaoui, a French citizen of Moroccan origin, who was arrested about a month before the attacks and was later convicted for being involved in the planning of 9/11. The question is, why did the government state that no black boxes had been recovered when they had?
What? That's
Level 5,
interesting, bro.
UAE were responsible. From the start, speculation about the Saudi government's involvement in the attacks has been rife, despite repeated denials from the Saudi kingdom. The 9/11 Commission report stated that no evidence was found to indicate that the Saudi government or any senior Saudi officials individually funded Al-Qaeda. However, it did acknowledge the presence of numerous private donors and sources of fundraising in Saudi Arabia and other Gulf states for Al-Qaeda before the 9/11 attacks. This finding reinforced the belief that the Saudi government was heavily involved in the attacks, and it was no coincidence that 15 of the 19 hijackers were Saudi citizens. In the aftermath of the attacks, the FBI identified 3 Saudi men living in the US they suspected of aiding the hijackers. They were named as Fahad al-Thumari, a diplomat in the Saudi consulate's office in Los Angeles, Omar al-Bayoumi, a former civil servant working in civil aviation who was officially a student in California at the time of the attacks, and Musayed al-Jarrah, who was a mid-level diplomat at the Washington Embassy in 1999 and 2000, overseeing Islamic Affairs Ministry employees at mosques and cultural centers around the US. His name was only revealed in 2020. The men, in particular Bayoumi, are alleged to have provided or directed others to assist 2 of the hijackers, Nawaf al-Hazmi and Khalid al-Midar, when they arrived in the US in 2000. Bayoumi claims he befriended the 2 after meeting them in a restaurant in San Diego, and as they spoke little English, he helped them settle into their new lives. Al-Thumari, who claimed he never met the hijackers, despite witnesses seeing him in their company, was closely linked to Bayoumi, and the FBI found phone contacts between the 2. It is unclear how Jarrah is linked to Bayoumi and Al-Thumari, but it is thought his role would have been the same as theirs, to help integrate the hijackers when they arrived in America and plan their attacks.
Damn.
All 3 men have been questioned by the FBI, and conspiracy theorists believe they were integral to the planning of the attacks, and many suspect them of being Saudi agents. However, the New York Times reported that the investigation into the men yielded circumstantial evidence only, and no direct links were established to the hijackers or their terrorist organization. Despite the fact that in late 1999 or early 2000, al-Bayoumi was receiving significant amount of money from Princess Haifa bint Faisal, the wife of Bandar bin Sultan, the Saudi ambassador to the US. Allegedly, these were to care for al-Bayami's wife's medical bills. It's not only conspiracy theorists that think Saudi Arabia was involved in the attacks. Families of the survivors also think they are responsible, and an ongoing lawsuit for compensation against the Saudi government is still ongoing.
Damn.
In 2011, investigative journalists Anthony Summers and Robin Swan released their book The 11th Day. In it, they claimed that the Saudi royal family supplied material and financial support to the 9/11 hijackers and encouraged anti-Western sentiment. There is no doubt that somebody enabled 19 hijackers, with no money, no knowledge of English, and no idea how to fly planes,
That's what I'm saying.
to infiltrate the US, stay undetected for a significant amount of time, and to prepare and carry out coordinated attacks. With
Somebody had to have helped them. Somebody
Many
had to
believe
have helped
that
them.
support came from a Saudi network that was already in place years before 9/11.
Damn, bro.
We're heading
Damn.
deeper down the iceberg now.
Oh,
To level
shit.
6,
It's
which is
getting
probably
good,
one of the
chat.
most commonly believed conspiracies surrounding 9/11. Controlled demolition. There are some people who believe that the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center were not brought down by the planes that crashed into them, but instead by controlled explosions. These individuals, including physicists and software engineers, argue that the towers collapsed straight down instead of toppling over, which is what they would have done if they had been structurally compromised by the planes. They claim that a large amount of explosives were hidden in the towers, and that key supporting beams were pre-cut, allowing the towers to fall on their foundations. Moreover, they maintain that after the collapse, any evidence that could have disputed this theory was removed and recycled due to the strict security measures at the site. However, the official report states that the Twin Towers collapsed due to severe structural damage caused by the planes that crashed into them and the resulting fires. This explanation is disputed by a group called Truthers, who argue that the fires burned for only 56 minutes in the South Tower and were not sufficient to cause the catastrophic collapses. The controlled explosion theory was compounded further by the collapse of World Trade Center Building 7, despite it not having been impacted by a hijacked plane. They point to the fact that even the authorities acknowledged that Building 7 was the first ever tall structure to collapse as a result of fire damage alone, and even to this day, it still remains the only building to collapse due to fire. Much of the building was leased by bankers, but some of the floors were occupied by the CIA. Another major red flag in the eyes of conspiracy theorists is the fact that the BBC announced the collapse of Building 7 at least 30 minutes before it collapsed. Combine this with the eyewitness account of Barry Jennings, the Deputy Director of Emergency Services for the New York City Housing Authority, who on the morning of the 9/11 attacks was summoned to World Trade Center Building 7 to assist in coordinating the emergency response. However, he became trapped in the building for several hours due to a series of explosions that, according to the official government account, never occurred. According to Jennings, he and Corporation Counsel Michael Hess had entered Building 7 before the South Tower was hit at 9:03 a.m. However, they were surprised to find that the offices had already been abandoned. Shortly after, Jennings received a call from his superior instructing him to leave the building immediately. But as he and Hess made their way to the 6th floor, an explosion occurred, sending them back up to the 8th floor and trapping them inside the building for several hours. Thankfully, they were eventually rescued before Building 7 collapsed at almost freefall acceleration at 5:20.
Damn.
After 7 years of investigation, the National Institute of Standards and Technology determined that the building had not come down due to explosives or controlled demolition. Instead, it insisted that the building had collapsed due to ordinary office fires. Many, of course, do not believe this and claim that controlled demolition is the only way, and that Building 7 had been the secret government command center.
Bro, it just doesn't make sense to me that like a plane hits the top of a building and it falls flat, like it all collapses like that. Like it just doesn't make sense, bro.
And needed to be wiped out at all costs.
That's wild, bro.
Level 7. Snehar and Philip had something to do with it. On Monday, September 10, 2001, 31-year-old internal medicine intern Snehar Ann Philip had the day off work. Her husband, Ron Lieberman, said goodbye to her and left for work at around 11 a.m. During the day, Snehar ran some errands and spoke to her mother. However, when Ron came home from work that evening, his wife wasn't there, and she didn't return that night. Initially unconcerned, he went to work as usual the following day. Shortly after, The planes hit the World Trade Centers near the couple's Manhattan apartment. Ron desperately searched for his wife in the chaos of that day, but she has never been seen since. However, some things didn't add up, and the family were putting out conflicting reports about Sneha's life. And it was later found out that her brother had lied about being on the phone to her in her final moments. The family were desperate for her to be remembered as a hero, using her medical experience to help victims of the 9/11 attacks, and her name was added to the list of the 9/11 victims missing. However, the police revealed a different story, and a very different version of Sneha's life was uncovered. They described how her life was reeling out of control with alcohol-related issues, marital problems, and a dispute that landed her in court. This conflicting information and the fact that Sneha's name was removed from the 9/11 victims list has led conspiracy theorists to believe she had something to do with the terror attacks on the US. Because her unexplained absence commenced on September 10, 2001, state law states that is when she died. However, no one exactly knows for sure.
That is a little spooky though. That's a little weird. I ain't gonna lie, that's a little weird.
Level 8. The Boy Who Predicted It. On September 6, 2001, 5 days before the attacks, Antoinette De Lorenzo, a teacher at Utrecht High School in Brooklyn, was teaching English as a second language to a class of Pakistani students. Antoinette led a discussion with the students about world events when she noticed one of her pupils staring out of the window towards the lower Manhattan skyline. She asked the pupil, whose name has never been released, "What are you looking at?" He replied, "Do you see those two buildings? They won't be standing there next week." At the time, Antoinette thought nothing of the remark.
What?
However, after the terrorist attacks, she became haunted by the comment and reported it to her school principal, who alerted the police and the FBI, and later they raided the classroom and took the youth and his older brother for interrogation. The youth admitted he had made the comment, and as he did, his older brother supposedly elbowed him, saying he was only kidding. Further details of the questioning have not been disclosed, although it is known that the boy's father was supposed to come back from Pakistan on 9/11, but due to flight restrictions had been unable to make the journey. However, when he did arrive in America about a week later, he was furious about his sons being interrogated by the authorities and claimed their constitutional rights had been violated. No further action was taken, and the boy returned to finish his schooling, although his family were placed under surveillance. There seems little doubt the story is true, and police describe De Lorenzo as a 100% credible witness. The question remains, how did a boy from Pakistan who couldn't speak English predict that the Twin Towers were going to fall? It seems there are only 3 real possibilities.
That's weird.
Either he had clairvoyant powers and could foresee what was going to happen. It was just a random remark with no real meaning. Or he had inadvertently heard on the grapevine that the trade centers were going to be attacked.
He knew something, bro. He knew something. That's wild, bro.
Level 9. Israel was responsible. Another theory claims no Jewish people were killed in the 9/11 attacks because 4,000 Jewish workers at the World Trade Center had received advance notice not to turn up for work that day. Believers in this theory suggest that the Israeli government was responsible for the attacks to prompt the US into attacking its regional enemies. The truth is that 119 Jewish workers at the World Trade Center were confirmed to be victims, and a further 72 were also thought to have perished. That equates to 9.2% of the victims, which lines up with the 9.7% of New York's commuting population believed to be Jewish at the time of the attacks. Similar conspiracies surround other nationalities, including Iraq and Iran, although no evidence of their direct involvement has ever been found. The Israeli conspiracy was fueled further after it was reported 5 Israeli men were seen dancing in the streets of New York in the wake of the attacks. They were later arrested and found to be in possession of cash, multiple passports and box cutters. The implication was that these young men knew about the attacks and were shadowing and supporting the Al-Qaeda terrorists from afar. Although there is no evidence to support the claims, there is some truth to the story. Following the 9/11 attacks, 5 Israelis were arrested for possessing box cutters. However, it should be noted that they were in the United States for work purposes, specifically for Urban Moving Systems, a delivery company owned by an Israeli. The box cutters were part of their job, as they were used to open boxes. The men were later released without charge. Reports online called them the Dancing Israelis, and to this day, there are still many who believe that the Dancing Israelis had something to do with the attack.
Damn, yo, there's so many conspiracies with 9/11,
jet
bro.
fuel can't melt steel beams.
Oh my God.
There are theories that suggest a special type of substance, known as thermite paint, was used to weaken the steel beams of the World Trade Center towers, causing them to collapse. This theory was proposed by Stephen Earl Jones, an American physicist and 9/11 conspiracy theorist. In 2006, Jones proposed that individuals within the government who had access to thermite or superthermite may have used these materials to demolish the World Trade Center buildings. Nanothermites are highly reactive and can be customized according to specific needs. They are commonly used by the military for propellants, explosives, and pyrotechnics. In 2009, Jones and other authors published an article in the Open Chemical Physics Journal titled Active Thermitic Material Discovered in Dust from the 9/11 World Trade Center Catastrophe. The article claimed that they found evidence of nanothermite in samples of dust produced during the collapse of the towers.
Oh, shit.
NIST responded to the claims, stating that there was no clear evidence to prove that the 4 samples of dust came from the WTC site. Jones invited NIST to conduct their own studies, but they did not take up this invitation.
Damn, nah, that one's spooky, bro. They found the thermite or whatever it's called in the dust, but then NIST said, like, how do you know it came from the explosions? Like, come on, bro. Come on, dog.
From the planes. Some maintain that phone calls made by passengers on the hijacked planes were manipulated using voice morphing technology, or that the passengers were coerced into making the calls. The reason was that it was believed to be impossible for cell phones to make calls from an altitude of 10,000 feet or higher, which was the cruising altitude of the planes. It was reported that only one call was made from Flight 77 by Barbara Olson. However, prominent conspiracy theorist David Icke suggested that it was impossible that the call was made from the plane's in-system flight call, since the Boeing 757's phones had been decommissioned. Multiple passengers on Flight 93 made calls to their loved ones using either in-flight phones or cell phones. However, it was still believed to be impossible to make calls from a cell phone at such a high altitude. Another notable aspect was the lack of background noise reported by the families of the passengers on Flight 93 during their phone conversations. Todd Beamer, a passenger on Flight 93, had his call routed to Airphone supervisor Lisa Jefferson, who stayed on the line with him. Beamer was heard saying "let's roll" after he and the other passengers made a plan to try to overthrow the hijackers. Unfortunately, the plane crashed in Shanksville before they could carry out their plan. Apparently, Jefferson found it strange that there was no standard beeping sound that usually occurs when a call is unexpectedly disconnected, leading conspiracy theorists to believe all the calls from the hijacked planes were fake. Lastly, there is the theory of voice cloning. I cannot for the life of me find information about this theory, but I remember people saying that it was strange that one of the passengers phoned his mother and stated his first and last name, something that would be very out of character if calling a family member.
That's weird.
Like I said, I cannot find this information online at all, so if any of you have ever heard of this, let us know in the comment section below.
Bro, what?
Level 12. The planes fired missiles before hitting the buildings.
Cap.
This claim, known as the no planes theory, believes that the planes that hit the World Trade Center and the Pentagon on 9/11 were not enough to cause as much destruction as they did, and suggest that the planes were actually cruise missiles designed to target the buildings they struck.
What?
And that any eyewitness accounts of these planes crashing, including the live TV footage, was faked, an illusion, or the missiles were made to look like passenger planes. Supporters of this theory cite the difference between the sounds made by a cruise missile and a jet engine, and that the hole created by the plane that allegedly hit the Pentagon was too small to have been made by a plane. This theory is backed up by the fact that even an untrained pilot would find it very difficult to hit the Pentagon accurately. Even highly trained fighter pilots have said that the required maneuver to hit the Pentagon so close to the ground would be extremely difficult without the plane breaking up. Additionally, there is only low-quality footage available of the incident, despite the building having hundreds of cameras. This further adds to the theory that the planes were in fact targeted cruise missiles that were disguised as aeroplanes.
I don't believe in that, chat. I ain't gonna lie. I don't believe in that.
Level 13, Larry Silverstein. American Jewish businessman Larry Silverstein has repeatedly been the target of anti-Semitic conspiracies over the past 20 years. Silverstein purchased the World Trade Center in April 2001 and sought compensation from his insurance company after the property was destroyed. Silverstein has been painted as a money-grabbing man who purchased the property and then organized the attacks to gain a multi-billion-dollar payout. It was revealed that Silverstein took out a major insurance policy a month or so before the attack because he knew it was going to happen. In interviews, Silverstein has revealed that he usually spent his mornings at breakfast meetings in Windows on the World, situated on top of the North Tower of the World Trade Center. However, on the morning of September 11, 2001, his wife insisted that he attend a medical appointment, which unknowingly saved his life. His daughter and son were also employed at the World Trade Center, but fortunately they were not there on the morning of 9/11. This incident, along with many other top executives who were not present on 9/11, has raised questions among people about whether they were merely fortunate or had some insider knowledge that something was going to happen on that specific day. Now, there's very little evidence to suggest that Silverstein knew anything, and his billion-dollar lawsuit took many years to sort.
Damn. Bro just got
Level
lucky.
14, billions missing in government funding, and then accountant office destroyed in Pentagon. It is claimed that the day before the attacks, the US government mysteriously lost trillions of dollars, and the 9/11 attacks were a way to distract the public away from the catastrophic loss of money. The conspiracy arose from remarks that then Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld gave the day before the attacks about the Pentagon's business practices. He is quoted as saying, "The technology revolution has transformed organizations across the private sector, but not ours, not fully, not yet. We are, as they say, tangled in our anchor chain. Our financial systems are decades old. According to some estimates, we cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions." In reality, Rumsfeld was using that number to show that the department was facing difficulties in keeping track of its finances due to outdated technology. After the attacks, theorists believed that the destruction of the accountant's office was a deliberate act intended to divert attention from the missing money.
Bro, chat, a lot of these like conspiracy theories are really just coincidence, bro. A lot of these, bro.
SEAL Team 6 threw the body of the most wanted terrorist in the sea because it didn't exist or he was killed years ago. The decision to throw bin Laden's body into the sea after his death at the hands of Navy SEALs on May 2nd, 2011 has given rise to various conspiracy theories, hoaxes and rumors. Doubts about the date and time he died were fueled by the decision to not release any photographic or DNA evidence to prove the most wanted man in the world was dead. This, coupled with contradicting accounts of the raid on bin Laden's compound, during which a live feed from cameras mounted on the helmets of the US Special Forces cut off for 25 minutes, has led to the belief that something has been covered up. It has been suggested that Osama bin Laden was killed years before it was publicly announced in the Tora Bora Mountains. However, this information was kept secret to maintain support for the ongoing war on terror. Additionally, there are claims that bin Laden died much earlier than the reported date, and that the announcement of his death was delayed to avoid clashing with the wedding of Prince William and Catherine Middleton. Another theory suggests that the timing of the announcement was intended to coincide with the airing of Donald Trump's Celebrity Apprentice, as a way to punish Trump for questioning President Obama's birth certificate.
Alright, bro.
What do you think of this one?
That has nothing to
strange that we never get to see Osama bin Laden's body, or do you think this is standard procedure within the army?
Bro, that has nothing to do with That has nothing
Level
to do,
16.
bro.
Prior to the September 11th attacks, there were some unusual stock trades made on certain companies that would be affected by the attacks. United Airlines and American Airlines, both of which lost planes in the attacks, experienced heavy selling of their stocks before 9/11. However, no other US carriers saw such trading activity on their stocks.
That is suspicious.
On the other hand, defense corporations, who would benefit from an aggressive military response, showed strong buying activity in the week before the attack. Morgan Stanley, which was located at the World Trade Center, was heavily sold, and insurance companies also experienced significant selling. The US Security and Exchange Commission even initiated an investigation into Wall Street's activity around the attack. However, they stated that it was purely coincidental, which it may well have been, but there are some who find this hard to believe.
That is very coincidence, though. That is extreme coincidence, bro.
Level 17, Air Defense Stand-Down Theory. Why did the world's most powerful air force fail to intercept any of the 4 hijacked planes? There are claims that NORAD, the North American Defense Command, had information beforehand about the hijacked planes. but either ordered their fighters to stand down or intentionally delayed scrambling them so they couldn't prevent the planes from hitting their targets. Given that NORAD is responsible for air defenses, it's reasonable to assume that they have the necessary capabilities to locate large passenger planes. Therefore, why didn't they scramble in time to prevent the tragedy? Furthermore, why were 2 scrambled jets ordered out into military airspace over Long Island while New York City was under attack? Conspiracy theorists believe that then US Vice President Dick Cheney ordered the military to stand down and not to intercept the planes. This, of course, has not been confirmed.
But even if they were to intercept the planes, though, like, there's Americans on there. You can't shoot the planes down. You know what I'm saying?
18. Flight 93 was shot down. Official reports state that the passengers of Flight 93 made a courageous effort to regain control of the plane from the hijackers. Unfortunately, during the struggle, the aircraft crashed into an open field in Pennsylvania. However, some theorists have raised doubts about the crash, pointing out that very little wreckage was found, and the crash site was too small for an airliner of that size. They suggest that the military may have shot down the plane, causing it to disintegrate over a larger area. Level 19. Holographic planes. There is a theory called holographic planes that argues that the planes were not real. According to this theory, they were holographic projections generated by advanced technology.
Alright, bro, like, come on, bro.
This theory is not supported by the numerous eyewitnesses who saw and heard the planes, the physical evidence of plane debris, and DNA from the victims. Despite this, some people still choose to believe in the theory.
Bro, the planes was real, bro. Like, come on, that's insane. The planes was real.
And so, we have reached the bottom of the iceberg. What could level 19 possibly hold, you ask? Well, this is the theory that The Simpsons predicted 9/11.
Bro, The Simpsons, bro?
In a 1997 episode of the popular TV show The Simpsons, titled The City of New York vs. Homer Simpson, there is a moment that seems to allude to the Twin Tower attacks. In a particular frame, there is a brochure that shows a ticket to New York for $9, and behind the number 9 are the Twin Towers, which looks like the date 9/11.
Oh, shit.
Although the creator of the show could not explain it, Bill Oakley, an executive producer on the show at the time, explained that $9 was picked as a comically cheap fare. He also acknowledged that the coincidence is eerie, given the events that would occur all those years later. And that brings us to the end of this video.
That is, yeah, like,
we would just like to say,
that is extreme coincidence, though, bro. Like, come on now, bro. Like, I thought they was gonna say something crazy, like in The Simpsons, they said the tower was gonna get blown up. Like, come on, bro. That's extreme coincidence, bro. WVid, though, chat. WVid, man.